Well, first of all, I would like this part of the Jewish story, which I think has been somewhat neglected and not well enough understood and appreciated. I would like this important and wonderful and rich part of the Jewish story to be better known. And by writing a book that is intended for a general audience and is intended to be, I hope, very engaging and interesting through, the fact that I'm actually traveling to these places and talking to people there. I'm not writing about this subject at a distance. I'm immersing myself in it. I would like to, in addition, as I mentioned, I think at the start of the conversation, I really would like to preserve the stories of the people who remain there in those countries, the family stories, to find out why people stayed, how they live, why they stayed despite all the challenges, but particularly to trace their stories back through the generations and sometimes forward by talking to family members of theirs in the diaspora. My book is about Jews who lived in the Arab world, spoke or speak Arabic, were often immersed in Arab culture on many different levels: literature, language, food, dress, everything that goes with a culture. I would love it if my book could somehow provide some insights into how people can coexist, people from different religions and cultures can coexist in a way that they often successfully did coexist in the past in many of these countries and still do today in Morocco, for instance. So, I think the subject of my book has become much more topical and much more urgent, and I would like it to inject something different into this very bitter, polarized narrative that we seem to be stuck in at the moment, even if it just makes people on different sides of the equation think a little differently about the problems that are being faced. Then that would be a wonderful outcome. The Arab culture and the Arab identity of the Jews who migrated to Israel in the second half of the 20th century was very much a subject of discrimination and attempts to erase it on the part of the new Israeli state, who wanted everyone to really fit into a sort of mold of Ashkenazi European. Now you've got to speak Hebrew. We don't listen to Arabic music here. The Arabs are the enemy. And there were decades of discrimination against so-called Mizrahi Jews in Israel. The stories are really, quite shocking from there. That discrimination continues, I think, to some extent. On the other hand, some of the diaspora communities that I've visited, for instance, went to Brazil to meet Jews from Lebanon. There are some big Middle Eastern Jewish communities across South America, but particularly, I guess, in Brazil, Argentina, also Mexico and Panama. I was focusing on pretty much on the Lebanese community in Sao Paulo and to a much lesser extent Rio de Janeiro. These diaspora communities, I would also mention as another very strong community, the very, very strong community, the Syrian Jewish community of Brooklyn, which I'm actually just writing about at the moment. I'm in the middle of that chapter. They have such a strong pride and identity, sense of being Syrian Jews, Lebanese Jews, Iraqi Jews. I met many Iraqi Jews in the UK and in Israel. So I think, that identity that has been somewhat suppressed and, subject at times to attempts to erase it, really has reasserted itself in the diasporas, in Israel, in the US, in France, in Italy. There's a really interesting, thriving Libyan Jewish community in Rome, for instance. And, one sees those communities that really vanished or are vanishing in the Arabic-speaking world, reconstituting themselves in those places and really thriving and perpetuating many aspects of culture. Of course, from generation to generation, these things get diluted. Perhaps the children, speak and understand Arabic because their parents came over, but the next generation, they're not. In a lot of cases, it's really, I think, only the food that gets perpetuated or carried on, along with, I think, importantly, modes of prayer. All of these, the Jews of all these different countries pray a little bit differently in terms of the ritual, the liturgy, and the melodies. Even within countries, I understand that for instance, the Jews of Cairo and Alexandria prayed differently. Damascus and Aleppo certainly. So that's an important thing that is being maintained. So yes, I think I would very much like the book to underline the degree to which these cultures and histories and identities are still thriving all around the world. After Jews picked themselves up and moved again and, put down roots and educated their kids and started businesses and did well, for the most part. I think that's a really important sort of piece of the story. They're not living maybe in Syria or Iraq or Yemen anymore, but they're carrying on what they can of those Syrian and Iraqi and Yemeni customs and ways of praying and what they cook for Shabbat dinner.